Just so you can start off with that.
I don't think there's only one sex pervert in this book.
Welcome to the 2-month review. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books, bringing you into our weekly podcast in which we talk about 1 and/or 5 books that are difficult. We break them down bit by bit, section by section, analyze, try and make sense of them. Question mark. Have some fun. Talk about perverts. Talk about World Cup. Joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Hello, Chad. Pleasure to be here on this wonderful World Cup Thursday. Their blood is on our hands because we watched it.
Woo!
Just so everybody knows, if you're enjoying the World Cup, you're a murderer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did you see? And we're joined also by Kaya Stravanis.
Hey.
Did you watch Did you watch the World Cup?
Famously fan of Germany. Yeah. Famous fan of Germany.
Oh
yes,
my God.
It's also still ongoing, but yeah, I've watched some games.
Gone.
You got a lot of blood on your hand. You got a lot of blood on your hands then. If you like anything, I feel like anything, blood is on your hands. Period.
I'm generally pro chaos when it comes to the World Cup. I want pure chaos. But I am happy that Poland went through, Belgium did not. None of the shitty Middle Eastern teams like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar made it through. So perfect. They don't deserve to go on. Germany didn't make it. Woo! Morocco, love it. All fun. It's fun and games. The U.S. doesn't look terrible.
Yeah, and Mexico didn't make it, and we did. What's going on in the world?
Their coach is fired. We're considered the worst coach in Mexican history now.
Ouch.
Wow, that's something.
And to add to the blood on your hands, blood on all of our hands as American citizens, is that an Iranian guy was murdered by their police because he was celebrating the U.S. beating Iran and knocking them out of the World Cup. So they shot him through the head.
To be fair, you kind of have to read the room. I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, I don't condone senselessly murdering people in the streets, but this is it really just brings it's like FIFA. I don't understand how this is such a corrupt sport, but FIFA says that this event is supposed to bring us together in these times of no, it's just built on the blood and bones of slave labor, and it's oh my God.
So just to drive that point home on our opening political commentary, the other day, the Qatar had officially announced that there is 3 deaths that took place during the World Cup that were related to the World Cup. And then there was I think there's some point there's 20, maybe 27. And now they're saying it's between 300 and 500 and probably closer to 500 than 300. And there's another study that showed that the immigrants who have moved to Qatar since they've been awarded the World Cup, over 6,500 have died. Although it's unclear if those were connected to World Cup related activities or just general deaths. However, not good. Qatar, go fuck yourself. Don't do that. Be better as a nation. Qatar is the setting is for passages. Look at this segue. So the passages, we don't know where it's set. It's a Mediterranean place and or somewhere hot and warm with beaches and a totalitarian government.
It's Greece, right?
It felt pretty Greek to me.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna hang on the totalitarian government part and just call out Qatar right now on that regard.
I don't know. Kind of hit us over the head with a lot of
Iran.
Greek.
I'm safe here in America. I'm never traveling back there again. Fuck you guys, and I'm glad you're out of the World Cup.
Man,
this book would be really good for some of the with Hellenistic studies or even earlier. It would be. Yeah.
I was thinking of Jenny Kellogg yesterday when reading the little bits in the margins of there's too much to look up separately. I'm not going to do that. But maybe she should come on and just give a breakdown, because I bet she could look through that and just really quickly explain it.
Just tell me how stupid I am. I always need that. So
yeah, I know. I love rereading these Anne Quin books, and I enjoy rereading them, and then immediately get done and I have nothing fucking intelligent to say.
Yeah. Like
Cool.
what's a syrinx? There was like a silklix or something. I was like, I'm not gonna look it up because it's probably just gonna be like it's a plum.
Yeah.
It's
So to frame all this, we are talking about Passages by Anne Quin, the first half of it. The real climax is coming in the next section, just FYI. And I don't want to give it away.
Again,
there is like it is a sexual climax. So if we're gonna deal with like that aspect of this book, because it is a very sensual and sexual book, like much even more so than 3 and Berg, this book is filled with fucking and lots of people are fucking and lots of people are fucking each other, and it's all there. So there's that. So this book is very short. It's made up of 4 sections, comprised of 4 sections. Section 1 and section 3 are essentially like stream of consciousness. I wouldn't say like a stream of consciousness sort of like rundown of what's kind of happening, ? From the female perspective primarily. And then the second and fourth parts are a journal written by the male, the lover of the woman who is looking for her brother, who may or may not be dead, who may or may not have been in this Greek/Mediterranean country where there's totalitarian rulers who are similar to Qatari rulers. Just gotta keep that going. It's better than hating Ohio, right? Like nobody's gonna come at us. But also fuck Ohio State while we're at it. But she's looking for her brother who may or may not be dead, who may or may not have been in this country, who may or may not have been in trouble with the government, who may or may not have been revolutionary, any number of those things. And she's along with her lover is accompanying her, and they move from town to town, maybe country to country, state to state. I don't really know. They're on the train. They're just going for new locales. And that's the plot. Right? Yeah. Lots of fucking, looking for a brother.
Yeah, that's what I got out of it.
Do you want to hear? I found some website called complete-review.com.
Oh yeah, Michael.
They had one for Passages. Mm-hmm. Our assessment in red, it has B. Interesting effort, some powerful writing. Interesting effort. That's a lovely. I like that review.
Effort.
I really like Michael a lot, but he has a schema.
And then it also says from the reviews, this is from Jane Miller, Times Literary Supplement. There is a good deal that is irritatingly opaque and elliptical in the book, but this fusion between what is experienced, dreamt of, and thought, a fusion most noticeably in revealing in solitude or on alien territory, is well suggested. But like you were saying, I like that idea in this that I'm feeling so far of like, it feels very borderless. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting like these travels, these dreams, these manias, this intermixing, I don't know what is what, and then this kind of amorphous, borderless, and then searching for something within that. So it has a very postmodern, fractured, which way is up feel to it.
So one thing related to that I'd like to say is that there are, not going to be able to find an example right here like I want to, but there are many times where it's like, she was going, he was there, we were together, I was this. Like as like consecutive sentences that does blur that line and make it opaque as to like even where are you focused. Mm-hmm. This is where she starts to use like the cut up techniques, which I'll turn to you, Kaya, who's reading Naked Lunch right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To talk a bit about that.
Which, speaking of dreams, I've got some real crazy ones since starting that book as well. So,
have you watched the Cronenberg film of it yet?
Do you like?
Oh, okay. You have to watch. Make sure you watch it after we're reading the book.
I think I saw that when I was like in high school, and it freaked me the fuck out.
As all Cronenberg should do.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's like, this is a much more poetic. This is much less. 3 had like a little bit of a plot to hold on to. This is much less. I think it's like, it's much more opaque, like you said. Like the very first line is basically kind of it. Now that I've dismissed the possibility my brother is dead, so now they're gonna go search for him. It's like your old thing, Brian, of like you have 2 types of stories, like someone comes to town or someone leaves town. Like they're leaving town to go in search the brother, which in a way, like, I wonder, I didn't even think about this until this moment, but I just finished reading John Barth's book, The Chimera. I can't say it. I can't say it right, and I can't remember which of the ways you're supposed to say it, so I'm just giving up. But in his book, and that book is really interesting. It is a retelling of like 3 different myths, and the idea at the core of it is that these myths are retold and retold and retold, and are never true, and are always shifting, and are always like endlessly mutating, but that there is like a sort of pattern to like the heroic myth, to the story of the myth, to the story of the way that these things happen. I wonder if there isn't like a little bit that's being played with here too, especially in the references to like Antigone and to Greek drama, which shows up here again, similar to what it did in 3, where they just mime in the whatchamacallit, in the swimming pool with the statues. But that really does, the statues and the idea of miming makes that very much seem like a Greek play to me. And this book has a little bit more of that reference. Like, there is a reference to a play. There's also a reference that seems like it is a direct reference to the book 3 on page 31, or no, sorry, 21, in which it says, silk cushions under chairs, between chairs, a tape recorder under a table, microphone near the bed. This cord twisted half under the carpet. A large straw cross lay on the foot of the black bed. Blankets in a heap as the 3.
Yep, I underlined that too.
Lay there. The tape recorder and the 3 is interesting as a remark. And here again, we have 3 again. We have the guy, the woman, and then the missing brother.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that scene specifically that you're talking about is the guy and the 2 other women at the party.
Getting down.
Yeah, which that entire paragraph, of which we end up finding out is the main woman watching them, right? Like, she's watching them through the window or something. This is the type of stuff I was expecting out of 3, based on the jacket copy, the description, everything, and it was not in there. So I think that's very interesting, where it's just not interesting, but it's that, like, that's the content that I was expecting, and not the content I was expecting out of this one.
See, so what are
I wonder if it's having more confidence perhaps, but I feel like this one like jumps right in. Like, it has the same kind of thematic things going on that were in the other 2 books, with like seasides, mysterious things missing, the erotic,
body parts.
yeah,
that a lot of missing body parts again,
fantasies, living out fantasies. But this just seems like it's more explicit and right up front with it, whereas the others weren't quite so. And I wonder if it's just more her being more confident as a writer.
I would say, even if it's not confident, like each one of those, like if Berg is like what was acceptable at the time, each one is like an aesthetic step forward. Like there's that I don't know the exact terminology for it, but in Canada, if you apply for like certain individual grants for like filmmaking or various artistic enterprises, you can get awarded a good deal of money because Canada does it right, but you can't be making sideways steps. Like, it has to be like a movement. You have to be like progressing in your art. You can't just be like, here's a sort of replica of what I did before. That doesn't get funded the way that it does if it's like, here's a new thing that I'm going to try. And so if Berg is like a fairly conventional novel at all points, it's just very Freudian in its way, and a little bit like slippery in some of the sort of more surreal aspects. And 3 is like a little more experimental with the different tones, the different aspects to it, and the way that things are concealed. But even within those paragraphs that we talked about, like the 3 voices, the S, Ellen, Ruth, Ellen, the kind of omniscient narrator, those are still read like plays, almost like plays of the time of that British moment. And then this starts to be like, what can you do if you remove even that? Like, everything's being removed to the point where like it is. I mean, the title passages to me suggest like so much movement, so much of like you're moving through things rather than being able to be pinned down. They're not pin downable, which is what leads to that like very obfuscating sort of nature of the prose, because a lot of it is just like slippery as shit. So like what goes on, like I was in the beginning just circling essentially words, like the fact that like the first paragraph, Now, not that I've dismissed the possibility my brother is dead. There's every chance, no chance. We move on, we towards, away. There's like this sort of movement and like idea of the patterns of the words, and more so than even like the individual sentences that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. Well, both of you were talking. I don't know if you guys also like start feeling a little anxious rereading some of those, the rhythm of that. But Chad, when you just read that, it made me feel a little anxious, like uncomfortable. And Brian, what you were saying, I think speaks to the last paragraph in the jacket copy, just the first half of the sentence where it describes the book as erotic and terrifying by turns. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I was definitely more terrified, felt the terror more than the eroticism, even in these scenes. I mean, these scenes should and could, by all means, the sex scenes, be very hot, very sexy. In a couple places, the way in which it's described, like I think it's actually the way in which the guy describes it in his journal, but like it's not arousing in a sort of literary erotic way, if that makes any sense. Like it okay, maybe it's just me.
But no, it's not like Jonathan Franzen where
what I'm saying is that I do appreciate.
I was joking, by the way. I don't find Jonathan Franzen's writing erotic, but
oh, really? That's what Chad would like to hate fuck all of those books. But yeah, what I'm saying is that to be blunt is that I do appreciate some literary eroticism and some, either the narration being arousing in the way that I find Margaret Atwood's earlier writing arousing, but this was just like, it's not even clinical. It's just so. Did you guys read the introduction? Because she keeps talking about the detachment of things, and how everything is so detailed and yet so detached, and that's kind of the feeling that I got more than anything in what we've read so far.
Do you want to try and walk through this a little bit by bit, since this is one that like I feel like we could have a little bit of expository logic to, because I have like a lot of questions I just put next to things like where I'm not really sure what's happening in a lot of parts. It's just like pretty and has like that certain patterning and a certain sort of tone to it and a certain sort of like play with language, but I don't really necessarily know what it is. And like I am admittedly not a poetry person and not a poetry reader at all, and this is the closest to like that form of fiction that becomes more poetic than it is plotted. Like where if most novels are telling some sort of like represent some sort of mimetic attempt to represent life, be it consciousness and its forms, it doesn't have to be cinematic, it doesn't have to be neo-realistic, but the attempt is at mimesis. This is like a strange sort of mimesis where I'm not sure what the thing is, and almost like it becomes itself. But the one that stood out the most to me in here, in this first 50 pages, the element that stood out the most that reflects off of 3 in particular is this geometry. A lot of things are very geometric in here, in terms of like the spacing, the making patterns she learned from, the space between things, the threesomes, like things are described in like a very and like geometric sort of style to me, which it kind of relates to what you're saying about being standoffish. But anyways, they start out, they're on a train, they go to the sea. And then where they are at this town, it's pretty early on, isn't it? Where it's on like 6, where they are accosted by like by people who have to look at their missing people. Yeah, 6 and 7. Like the party faces of officials, my own for them. No, I don't belong to the party. My brother might have done. I don't know. We were followed. We knew they were there in hotel lobbies, restaurants, cinemas, parks, cafes. Quite by accident, I am involved. The cab driver watched us in the rear mirror. To be on the move again, at least, is something, he said, looking out at the back window. And there's that like motion again, the back window again, the angles of things, the following. There's a lot of like that sort of patterning, which also brings to mind a bit of like Nouveau Roman, who I think she was like minorly influenced by, but does have an affinity with in writing style, where it is like about laying out where things are and sort of recounting them. The process of making is as important as what the thing is.
Do you think that is reflected, like the guy's journal part is kind of like a Cliff's Notes
so like
for
that,
all of the stuff?
I don't know how to frame this, but the geometric stuff too with his lists. How are you to read lists? And the third line, there's a column for anyone who's not watching or has not read the book. I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you haven't read the book. That's your own problem. BetterHelp.com or BetterHelp.com can assist you with that problem. But there is like a column down the left-hand side that is in smaller font. There's sort of like notes that are almost either like reflective of a rereading of the diary or like some sort of intrusion of a different sort of thought. And then in the diary part, that's the next, the majority of 2/3 of the page, 2/3 a column that's about 2/3 of a normal page. Sometimes that gets split up into like, for instance, on 32, where it has dreams interrupted, and then like a little squiggly that says the terrors of midday sleep.
Oh my God, those are the worst. That got me so hard. Midday sleep dreams are horrifying.
It's good that you don't take them anymore since you work from 9 to 5 every single day in the office.
See, I've been thinking what I would really prefer to do is like a 9 to 5 schedule on the East Coast, but like West Coast Pacific time hours. So like
12 till 8.
Yeah, I would much prefer to work.
It's like 12 till 3.
No, 12 to 8 would be amazing.
So you want to work retail.
So you want to, yeah.
Hey, those discounts.
So you want to work Instagram.
Take me back, anthropology.
Okay, so
I'm curious though with those notation parts. I wonder how much of it was influenced with Pale Fire coming out earlier in the decade.
From which parts?
Pale Fire coming out earlier in the decade. When you're looking at the journal with the notations of the journal to give us kind of that like metatextual information for it. I'm curious if there was any influence from Pale Fire being such a big book in the early 60s and this coming at the end of the decade.
I could buy into reading that, but I also feel like this is more like the Anna Kavan feminist sort of like free flow writing, like Dorothy Richardson's Stream of Consciousness versus like Nabokov's so like mannered and like specific and hyper controlling, and this feels a little bit loose. Like I think that these things are like almost like the cut-ups of like you take like those sort of books, those sort of ideas, and just kind of put them in next to one another, and they don't have to necessarily make sense. Whereas Nabokov that would appall him. Everything has to be in its place. I think that's a difference between the two, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if she had read that and was like, oh, like I can do something really cool with that, and then when she wants to write this book, and has maybe a little more freedom to do what she actually wants to do, can start messing around with like adding more Burroughs technique, adding a little like weird comments on the side, like really mixing it up, being more upfront with dark, weird sexuality right at the forefront. I'm just curious if that was.
If you liked like that kind of postmodernism and like lots of good drugs.
Yeah, exactly. Because it feels like this just feels like it's a little more transgressive and a little bit more energetic than the other two books we read.
Yeah, it's a lot looser. I think a lot looser.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not. Maybe there is like if you read this enough times, like everything is in its place, but it doesn't feel like it on the first read. I don't know that it's supposed to. It feels like water. It feels like that sort of like movement and eddying and swirling, but not like a step-by-step way to get to from point A to point Z in any way.
And so far for me, this one was the least humorous of the three as well.
I will say that I find this funny and entertaining while we're talking about sex stuff. So on 4025, when it's the guy's journal, her fantasies making love on the edge of a bank, cliff, a space capsule. Imagine floating around in all that space and copulating at the same time with two men, one under, one above, another woman. I was like, yeah, yep. Space capsule.
I agree. I agree. It seems like there's less humor, but when it is, it feels so much punchier.
Or maybe it's not humor.
In 3, like, where he's talking about his mom dying, and he's like, my last words to her, there are maggots in the mince pie.
Yeah. That was funny. And then I like anxiety.
Yeah, like just these little, it's not quite a quip, but it's just even at the bottom of this is maybe my favorite line, I'm not quite sure, but the bottom of 51, where he's writing about the poor guy or the beggar and his sister, and they're walking through the vineyards, and he finds himself alone with the guy, and he says, found myself continually surprised at the dexterity of his stumps. Just the combination of words. And I'm going to say right now, I think that for me, and Quin is now becoming, if early on in college or in high school even, I would have been so obnoxious about loving her. Like, disgustingly obnoxious.
So what you're saying is that you were obnoxious, but maybe not about Anne Quin.
About other things that could be ruined and forever unclean. But
I like, in terms of the humor,
I'm grateful, as with Red, only later on in my life. You're cutting in and out.
You're cutting in and out a little bit. If you want to check your thing.
You're cutting in and out.
On page 31, I like the quote, or the line, quote, "Don't take me out of my home," end quote, the girl said, surrounded by 6 starving children and their excrement. And then that's next to, and so
the paragraph it's next to, I really liked. I think there's something to that. I think that kind of a tone that fits really well with the first half of this, right?
Yeah.
The situation here is intolerable, and there's no hope unless a revolution starts.
And bloodshed under clear skies. Yep. Such a climate brings murder, war crimes easily. And next to that line of like, I don't want to leave my home surrounded by this person. I think one other thing. Okay, so they get accosted by these people, going back to the beginning part, and they get out, where they're like, oh, your missing papers have been found. Have a good journey, blah, 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 blah. The other thing that's going on there is that there's a reference before that page of her going off. So like she goes off and like has sex with various people throughout this section. And he will stay in his hotel room. Usually there's the time that he goes and has the threesome at the party where she is, but he thinks she might've been in there, might have seen him, but not necessarily. But she is often going out to meet people that may be related to the search for her brother, may not. They're also like sometimes going to like graveyards to try and find the brother, and to like a reference to one of the ones I think is important is like, as they're moving from place to place to place, because they keep moving from place to place to place. And that's right. Like it could be the Greek Isles, but I don't think it's like one space. I think it's like that sort of island hopping thing where they're moving to like different places, because they take the boat and they go past the one island where the guy's like, that's where they took these people and took them out the island and like killed them, and then tied their feet down and threw them in the water so they never came up, and they're good shark food. Like there's like this underlying violence like right there under the surface. And I feel like they go from place to place, seeing that violence, wondering where her brother fit into that violence, and then trying to make sense of the violence for her, making sense of the violence through fucking.
Kind of sounds like the World Cup.
Kind of sounds like the World Cup. Plus White Lotus. Passages is the World Cup meets the White Lotus.
Yeah.
Well, that's marketing copy and other stories, and you can have it for free.
So if that's what her purpose is, can we talk about what his purpose is? or not purpose, but it's like even the actions, because his actions are not that different from hers.
No, he like follows out, and sometimes he like it seems to go. I'm just paraphrasing here to try and make sense of it, and we can look at specific things and you guys can fill in blanks. But my sort of take was that he does sometimes go out and meets people. He goes and meets that woman who he goes back to her house and like isn't into her, but he's like, well, her daughter's kind of hot. And then she's like, oh, here, I'll take my daughter's shirt off and like massage her breasts. And he's like, this is maybe a little weird. He has a threesome at the thing. There's like an orgy moment somewhere in here too that I just wrote orgy. Yeah. On 53, the wild party that he leaves. But he seems interestingly like uninterested in her.
Yeah. Yeah.
As if he's observing her and observing himself through her and through this search, that if the search for her is for her brother, the search for him is for his sense of identity that's not related to her.
Yeah, that's what I really like on page 36, Diary of the Separated Woman.
Yep.
Quote, I love all men. How can I ever be tied to one man for the rest of my life? She lives with, from her passions. She wants to recapture her youth, not accepting she has lost hers. She makes love with men younger than herself. The age of her brother disappeared. It's kind of like he's kind of along for the ride and wants to document it, and it's almost like an anthropologist or something, right? With all of the references to the Greek things and making these passages through, like going along with her and observing and dabbling in her pleasures as well. But I don't know what his purpose is other than to like record and give a different side of the mystery.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she does going back to like 30, page 30 is one of the ones I marked that's across from the political situation quote that we used a little bit earlier, are two paragraphs that begin basically the same, in which they're describing, I believe, her, where he says, she is in her middle 30s, appears younger without makeup. She looks for her brother, whom she believes came to this country. She is positive she'll find him. Meanwhile, she is in her middle 30s, appears younger, at times older, has the air of a woman who knows her way about. On occasions acts like a child, knows that men are delighted with this image. She's playing at Antigone. This eccentricity she cultivates, wants those she meets to court this. There's one other thing related to that, sorry to babble on, but there's also the part where like he goes through like all of her different types. Yeah, here it is. Where she is, her faces on 39. And this ties into the idea of the kind of masks from 3, where he talks about the different aspects, her different faces. She's a mature woman, languid in movements, not chain smoking, or dispensive drinks, a femme fatale, teasing, flirtatious, quick, witty, mysterious smiles, mystic, soulful, wistful, pensive, long, deep gazes, country girl at heart, walks without shoes, which I think is hippie, walks without shoes, usually by the sea, swims naked, lets the wind toss unsprayed hair. Like there's 3 of them. There's 3 masks or faces that he refers to. And he's sort of documenting her sense of like being almost fragmented. I wonder if there isn't like a way that you could read this as like the brother going missing is the fragmentation of herself, in which she needs to find him to regain a sense of self. And he's watching her because the only way he can gain a sense of self is through this vicarious nature of describing and defining a woman in particular, but of a reality. Whereas her experiences are really like in the motion, in the flow, in the I, we, they, she, him, them, like movement. His are a little bit more controlled and a little bit more like, this is the step back. Here is what psychosis is.
I like the commentary that we have though with those 3 masks, right? Often she gets pretty high, then she forgets which role she had started with, and a delightful mixture of them all appears, leaving the man confused or even more infuriated.
Yeah.
So like if she's integrated, she infuriates her lovers. So it has to be like a fraction of herself. Yeah. Well, sure. Oh, sorry, more infatuated. Sorry. Yeah.
Infatuated, yeah. There's so her part through the first part is a part that I was like, wow, this is hard to read through. One of the instances that or one of the things that I want to point out related to this that goes through our whole season so far is, again, what the fuck are paragraphs in the Quin world?
They are
like unlike anyone else.
I initially thought that they were all separated into threes, but that does not hold true.
No, and there are ones that there'll be like on 10. There's two that end with a period, question mark, period, period. Then it's one that ends with nothing, then a period. Then there's like nothing, period, nothing, 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 period. But for anyone who hasn't read this that's looking at it, in the paragraphs, they will end with things like, she fell forward, laughing under, new paragraph, trees, and gardens where statues were arranged in shaded areas. Like it could continue. You could read across that gap, but that gap feels intentional in terms of separating out or creating like a caesura or some sort of lacuna that's like in between to cause you to go from one place to another, to move, to have a passage, I suppose. This really, what you're saying too, Brian, I feel like this is where it's like extracted a lot of like the elements of conventional plotting to see like what can you do? Can you make sense can you make sense? Can you make a thing without having to like follow most of those rules? Especially the Aristotelian, the three things that come together: time, space, motion. Yeah, you guys are looking at me. I'm not going to.
Probably a Greek word.
It is a Greek word.
Like to phone a friend. I don't know. I think Brian would probably have a better answer for it, but I am going to say if we did not have the journal entries of the man, I would have no idea what the hell.
Right. Just to back up, it was Aristotle defined the three unities for like, especially for plays, unity of place, time, and action. That those unities are what causes the catharsis to take place, and or are parts of like what sets up to be allowed for a catharsis to take place, in which you're watching Antigone or whatever, and you identify with these things happen. You're able to like see it in the same way that someone would see it mimetically, and therefore the catharsis can happen. This sort of breaks those three things apart really hard with that, even with those paragraphs, is separating place and action and time across like a line that's cut in half.
And in Greece, that's really rude. What does she have against Aristotle? I don't understand.
Wait, which one of them is in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
I don't remember.
Socrates.
Socrates. Yeah.
True. But in his part, I mean, it does, like what you said, Kaya, like it makes it make more sense, I guess.
I mean, for me, it filled in a lot of blanks. Like I asked you up through page 23 as like, I have no idea what's going on. And I was rereading paragraphs and rereading because I found myself sort of not skimming the poetic ones, but just gliding through them and then going back because I was worried that I had missed something crucial to understanding everything. And then got to the end of that section and did not have any. And I felt so comforted by his journaling. Like there was, I mean, it is very simply the other perspective. He's the other person in the setting, in the situation with her. So he's observing her and she's observing him. And even on page 27, in the margins, he writes, how she watches me, God, how she watches herself watching. However, if no one observes me, I have to observe myself all the more. And I thought that spoke very much to their interaction, their connection for, I don't even know that it is sort of a connection that they have. Not necessarily a spiritual one, but there is something going on. Where it's like the tetrasy fitting together.
Yeah, not to pull out another Greek term, but it's like, I think this book plays a little bit with like parallax, where the idea that you see from two different perspectives can make the thing three-dimensional in a sense, or can cross over, but they won't necessarily overlap. That seems to be happening through this too, and she uses the different techniques to really like highlight the difference between the two, and also like to further emphasize. Like I feel like the diary is a lot more internal recountings and like musings, whereas her section is a lot more of doings and actions of things that are in motions that are being and becoming, versus his being like, here's the thing. But then his dreams are crazy. And like one of the dreams is like set, and then it's like the cut up version of that dream is this. And it's like the same thing, like rearranged and like tossed in a bag. So there's like ideas of chance, I think, that play throughout here too, which is one of those one of the very first words in the first paragraph is chance repeated. And I think that there's the like that idea of like luck, of strangeness, of serendipity that kind of goes throughout, that comes through motion. Like they don't know where they're going or what's going to happen or if they're going to find anyone or what, like all of that kind of future stuff of like the plans and the plotting are not present in this book.
Yeah.
Should we go to another town? Yeah, we need a new atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that, going off of what you just said, the one thing that they sort of seem to agree on that stands out the most is when they get out of Dodge from that little island town. They're both just like, oh no.
Yeah.
As soon as we can, we are getting off this rock. This is horrible. Otherwise, I wouldn't really say that they're on the trip together, really. I think that's fascinating.
Every once in a while it seems like she goes back to his room. Or that they're staying in the same place.
And yeah, I think they're sharing a room. Yeah, they're in the same room.
I couldn't tell because like it feels sometimes like, I mean, they both are off on their own trips. That's fine. But I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind.
Would you guys go on a trip like this? If someone was
dead brother?
No, if someone were to be like, you know what?
Go to Qatar and try and find a dead brother? No.
I think my brother is dead or maybe not dead. I'm gonna go look for him. Do you want to come with me and we'll like fuck sometimes? Maybe.
No. Are we going to Qatar? No. Sorry, I'm just gonna ride this one.
There's a tremendous amount of like everything in this book so far feels very like uncertain.
Yeah.
The way the traveling is working, the way the time is working. Do the characters need each other? I don't know. She doesn't even know if her brother is alive or dead. Like there's this like wonderful playfulness with uncertainty in this piece so far. So I really like.
Agreed. I don't know. Is there anything else that you guys want to add to? Minotaur 45.
Yeah.
Minotaur shows up.
Yeah. Minotaur.
Can we not have a book without minotaurs?
I don't think so.
What is it?
I feel like it's you know what's interesting? One of the things you said, Kai, about it making everything make sense. I just noticed this. Let me see if I'm right here. Yeah. So on page 6 is the one where in her section, she's like, the part that I read, no, I don't belong to the party my brother might have. I don't know. We were followed. And then on page 41, which is the entry for August, it says they couldn't bear it a moment longer. They knew that they were being followed. Despite it being the middle of the night, they ran away. Like there are like certain things that the pattern recounts is being recounted in the next section in a different way, but also like in a different form of knowledge, in fact, like a different way of looking at and organizing the world. I think like so one thing with the two, like I feel like hers is like very much set into the eddy-like river situation. It's going, what's happening, you're hitting rocks, you're swirling around, you're going through islands, the sea is present. It's all part of that idea of motion and like that larger pattern. Whereas I think his wants to taxonomize or like make things put into place. Like all these lists, like the lists of like, where's one? Like the one that, oh shoot, where'd it go? There it is. On page like 38, where it's like the notebook of a depression, lowness, depth, valley, descent, psychopathy, adversity, poverty, nervousness, the indulgence, evasion, excuses, attitude of cynicism, quiet intolerance, making love coldly, clinically. Like it's very like defining of things and trying to like make the dots or the stones of meaning, whereas hers is very much like at flow of island volcanic. We had been told of a few fishermen worked the closer shore. Houses half in ruins, small birds fluttered between the shafts, grapes, vines. It's descriptive without giving a label to anything, whereas his tends to turn more towards label, self-pity, arrogance, resignation, wanting, demanding, reassurance. Like these are more labeling things than her section, just as like a contrast between the two of like a point and line system. She's more about the connections. He's more about what the thing is, maybe. This is really simplifying, oversimplifying.
I think it's interesting that you brought up or used the words labeling. Because one thing that stuck out to me was when he talks about her sort of hyper interest in his Jewish blood, his Jewish ancestry. And, you know, he says that I tried to think about whether or not I felt this way sometimes with Latvian, but on page 34 at the top where he says, strangely enough, I felt more Jewish with her curiosity than I've ever felt before. And I'm interested in seeing where that goes.
Yeah.
Just the labeling of things and this focus. I like the moments where he seems to be having a little bit of fun, either in his writing or just around, like while she's being detained and her papers are checked, he convinces this local boy that she's a whore he picked up the night before.
Yeah.
So he's like sort of screwing around.
He feels a little bit above it all in that sense. Like these things are going on for her. She's looking for her brother.
Right.
The papers are missing are hers.
Right.
Like he's there, but she's the one who's on the journey, and he's just sort of like you said before, like sociologically observing it or whatever it might be, but like not really. Like his participation is very muted. Like there's frequently like in his part or in his journal part where like when she goes out, it's just like she just goes out. Like she's out doing whatever. Like he's not really actively present in that sense. I don't know.
And that's why I think it's I also want to see, looking forward to seeing whether, not that, again, with labeling, not that there needs to be any distinct understanding of what they are to each other, but right now I don't really get why he's there. With S and 3, sort of figured it was the social class, the disparity. She wasn't that well off, and so she sort of became, they sort of brought her in as a pet, but she ended up sort of being kind of the zookeeper for them. And for this guy, I have no sense of what he's doing there other than just being there.
Do you get the feeling he's older?
I do.
Really? I thought that I got the feeling that they were both just kind of young.
I think she's in her 30s. I think that description of her is, I think that description of she, as on page 30, is of her. In her middle 30s, appears young without makeup. I don't know if I felt like he's older. I also want to point out that the one entry of his that has a date is August 18th, which is the dream one, followed by the cut-up dream, which is like the specificity of the date versus the like the cut-up version of the dream includes a line that says, "White horses come onto my head, eyes." So like those two things are very, very different between the specificity of the date and the like strangeness of his dreams or the surrealness of his dreams.
I assume that was cocaine related.
Everything was a white horse. Like we've all seen Twin Peaks. Like, gotta ride that horse.
And you brought up some of the repetition of things, like the repetition of chance and chance. There's a repetition where he says the weather's my outlook. These sort of things that as an editor, I don't think that this is poor writing, but it's something that I think, Brian, maybe you would agree, in writing courses, you're kind of taught to avoid overusing descriptive words or certain things, but the way it fits into the dreams, and Chad, you talked about the dream and cut up dream for August 18th on 48 and 49. Even though it's a cut up dream, it could very well just be another night. Like, there are enough variations of it, and that felt super, super real for me. Because I definitely have dreams where there are elements or certain plot points or experiences that I feel like I go through again and again and again, and I need to find some sort of resolution to be able to have that specific detail just finally done and over with. And I really like what she's doing with that in this book. I'm kind of learning to accept repetition.
One of the parts that's like that, this is two things in one, but on page 23 at the top, one of the repetition parts that sort of creates how these demonstrates how these patterns are made is part of the sky closest to the horizon white. Mm-hmm. White has its hand lifted. That in the room, in the half light then, behind glass formed a new shape, as ice pinnacles forms new shapes. Plants, strange leaves, shapes the snow, forms in the air. White olive trees white. The insects quieter then. So you got white, ice, snow, white.
Shapes.
And then I really like the bottom of that, which I think is the so there's this book, Spiral, Meander, Explode, that talks about like form and fiction and like different options of that. And I think that this is one where like she's telegraphing what the form of this book is the bottom of that page. He threw 2 stones in the pool. I watched the circles increase equally, one within the other without the one destroying the other. It's getting really cold, he said. We move on. And like, that's kind of where like her ripple, his ripple, they don't destroy each other. They keep moving.
I would have died for Anne Quin in college. Those lines. It's just borderline enough, like undergraduate workshopy stuff, but God, I love it.
So do you guys have a favorite line? Oh, one other that gets repeated is the title of this episode, Forms Forming Forms. Forms forming themselves. And then later, Feeling Myself in a World of Forms is another one where it again represents like kind of geometry and the forms of like how things can be seen or discussed. But do you guys have a favorite line? I have one and I don't want anyone to steal it.
You already sort of stole part of mine, but
mine is on 35. We are mediums inhabiting each other's imagination.
Mine comes on 37. It says Tuesdays. Girls, boys rise, their bodies dark, rich brown. They go down, come up from the beach, laughing for no apparent reason, then liking the sound of their own laughter turning into song. God knows I envy their lightness, their despair, a certain kind of despair only the young have, irrational, inconsistent. Which made me ask, like, how old is this guy?
Yeah, that's what makes him older.
I'll go with this one, also on 37. A short dream while dozing, clung to it with delight. A dream of many offshoots, full of a dozen connections, becoming clear in a moment, but hardly more than the mood tone remains.
Like it a lot. So next week we will be going through the end of passages, which is again a pretty short book, available from And Other Stories, 108 pages. If you haven't read up till now, you can catch up very quickly. In fact, Claire Louise Bennett, who wrote the introduction to this edition, suggests reading it all in one sitting, which I think would break one's mind, but I'm not a genius. So you go, Claire. But we'll be going over that next week, and then we will move on again. But we're into the Anne Quin like true experimentation coming like right up near the end of her life in a way. So Here we go. I've got nothing else. This has been the 2-month review. You can support us at Patreon/2-month review. You can find us on anywhere that you find your podcast. You can watch us on YouTube. You can ask questions if you watch us live on YouTube, which is fun. So if anyone wants to jump in and start like banging away some questions and pointing out how we do not know what we're talking about, that would be great. Otherwise, rate, review us, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your bookstore to buy these books, to stock these books, and to play 2-month review in the background as people shop. Looking at you, Kimbo. And we'll be back next week. Anyone have?
If we're all gonna, I'm just thinking, like, if we're all gonna die, I mean, you might as well die making a stadium, so your life has meaning.
Because then then you know that someone's gonna win in that stadium, and that person's gonna be a winner, and they're gonna have national and international glory. And you will have contributed. You will have put that I-beam together.
I'm just going to die a loser.